You're listening to the Packernet Podcast Network.
You ever hear of test driving a phone network? Well, US Cellular is letting you test drive their nationwide 5G for free. Try out US Cellular wherever you have spotty service, your commute to work, that one spot in your house where your service dips. It's as easy as doing a little beep boop pop boop pop with your phone. That's the buttons, that's the noise they make. Anyways, test drive US Cellular's nationwide 5G coverage for free for 30 days. Just download the Try Us app. US Cellular, built for us. Terms apply. Visit uscellular.com/try us. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident panelist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_dadav. Well, we did recently a mock draft, or not a mock draft, but we kind of went over the NFL draft for 2025. Kind of just the early round candidates so far as they stand. One of the things that's tough about the Packers is that for the most part, they're okay. Mentioned that basically outside of offensive line, it's possible that all the positions are fine. It just kind of depends how things turn out. Corner is questionable, safety is questionable, linebacker is questionable, defensive line is questionable. It's a young team, there's a lot of questions. But with that in mind, I thought it would be interesting to go through and talk about which players in 2024 essentially have one more year to prove their worth or they're going to be gone. Now, I'm not going to go through absolutely everybody because when you get to the bottom of the roster, it becomes, first of all, more complex and second of all, less interesting. For example, Dimitri Stanley, the wide receiver. Is it his final year to prove something? I have no idea. I don't know, first of all, if he's going to be even given an opportunity to prove anything. By that, I mean if he's even going to make the practice squad. But I also don't know that it's, for all I know, he could hang on for 2-3 more years. Some of these guys the Packers like, and they just kind of clingers on, and they keep coming back. I don't know. I don't super care. I mean, best of luck to him and all, but it's not an interesting part of the topic. And aside from that, there's some gray area, which we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So first of all, position by position, quarterback being first. Assuming Jordan Love gets his contract, which I think we're all about 99.9% sure, there isn't much to say about quarterback. I don't think Clifford or Pratt are in their final years. You could maybe say Clifford, but I really don't think so. The only person to have that conversation about is Magoo, who isn't even a quarterback anymore, so I think we have some time. With that being said, if Pratt continues, and I'll say continues because he had a really good offseason up to this point, continues to play really well. Sean Clifford was drafted, so he's not going to be gone, I wouldn't think, this year, but is it possible after the 2025 season that they're like, all right, it's time to move on, especially if they continue bringing in quarterbacks? Bottom line is, I think we'd all like to see Sean Clifford play at a high level. And by high level, I mean, as far as backup quarterbacks go, prove that you're worth some kind of draft compensation. Either way, I think the Packers have a long-term vision for both of these guys. I don't really think they're going anywhere, and Jordan's about to get locked up for a very long time. Running back, well, we know Marshawn Lloyd. I mean, we'll talk about 4. We have 6 right now. Josh Jacobs, A.J. Dillon, Emmanuel Wilson, Marshawn Lloyd, Jarvion Howard, and Ellis Merriweather. The first 4 are the more interesting 4. Emmanuel Wilson might fall into that category of being sort of a later round guy that we can't really know about, and I think that might be the situation. But I do think it's worth highlighting that he's in a very tenuous situation, right? He's talented, he's done a lot of good things, but it's like we've got Josh Jacobs now, we got Marshawn Lloyd, like he's got a lot of work to do. So I do think I will put him in that category. Also, his fate largely is tied to some of these other guys. If things don't go super well with Josh Jacobs and A.J. Dillon, could we see a situation where Jacobs is a short timer, A.J. Dillon is out the door, which we're kind of skipping ahead here, but And we're looking at Marshawn Lloyd and Emmanuel Wilson as our running backs with, maybe the Packers looking to add some more people. But still, I mean, he needs to prove that even if we're moving on with these guys, we want you to be that guy. So far, he has. He's done everything right. Every time he's been given an opportunity, he's been fantastic. And that's really all he needs to continue to do. And even that might not be good enough, but he needs to be setting himself to be in a position where if things go south elsewhere, the Packers feel confident with him. One of the more obvious examples that would probably come to everybody's mind is A.J. Dillon. I like A.J. He's embraced the state, the local area of, around Green Bay. I won't say Green Bay specifically because it's not, but, very few players have embraced the team and the culture as much as A.J. Dillon have. And he's had some great moments, but, it's unfortunate to have your worst year by kind of a wide margin be, last year. And he needs to have a big resurgence in what A.J. Dillon has shown in the past, right? Remember, PFF has graded him as a top running back, I think 2 years for him. And then last year was just a big drop-off. So he needs to be a big contributor. He just needs to be better than what he was. Because right now, and I've said this before, and I didn't like saying it because I always liked Dillon, but very rarely do you see Dillon run and just think, man, not a lot of people could do that. Almost every one of his runs, you just feel like you can pick any old running back out of the scrap pile and he could have made that same run. And you don't expect that from a guy who's as much of a physical freak as A.J. Dillon is. The power just is not there. It's most of his bulk is for show. It doesn't show up on the football field. And there just needs to be better. I mean, he's a good, well-rounded guy. He's good as far as being, an adequate runner as well as a blocker and a receiver. But that's kind of becoming the norm these days, especially with receiving. Most running backs, if you can't catch passes, you just aren't going to make it, period. And a lot of them that can't are just spending a lot of time in front of the jugs machine, and they're just making it work. So, I mean, long story shorter, A.J. Dillon, this is 100% it, and he needs to step it up. And I don't even know exactly what that means other than being the best running back this year. Because the fact of the matter is, even if A.J. Dillon looks pretty good, this is the final year in his contract. Are the Packers going to actually pay him? I mean, it's so hard to find a path for him. I mean, he's almost in the same situation as Emmanuel Wilson, where you kind of need Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd to not be the answer. I mean, in what world do we pay A.J. Dillon? We just drafted Marshawn Lloyd. I mean, even if Josh Jacobs really just doesn't pan out very well, we're going to keep him for 2 years, right? We've established that his 4-year I think it's 4-year contract is essentially a 2-year, I think is the situation. Maybe a 1 year, depending on how you look at it. It's an expensive 1 year or a cost us nothing 2 year. Josh Jacobs kind of is in a prove it year, as weird as that sounds, because again, technically it can be a 1 year and done situation, and with Marshawn Lloyd knocking on the door and technically A.J. Dillon being an option as well as Emmanuel Wilson, Josh Jacobs is brought in to do some special stuff. I think it's more than likely the Packers are going to hang on because it's more than likely that Dillon leaves. So even if you're unhappy with Josh Jacobs, I think you're going to give him another shot. Jacobs with Marshawn Lloyd, another year in the system, another year to kind of figure some stuff out. So I think it would have to be rather catastrophic in order for them to want to move on. But it is possible. I mean, he has to be the guy that they're paying for, or they may come to the conclusion that they don't really want to pay for it anymore. And so again, it all these guys, it kind of comes down to how everybody else plays, right? If Marshawn Lloyd is just an absolute beast, and Jacobs is just kind of maybe there's a situation there. But really, the biggest thing is A.J. Dillon. I mean, it's a massive uphill battle for him to be able to get in there. And I think similar to Emmanuel Wilson, it's sort of, even if he has a good season, I just don't know. I don't know if the Packers actually, because he's the only one right now that needs a contract. Everybody else is under contract for a long time. They got Jacobs and Wilson and Lloyd and Howard and Merriweather under contract into the foreseeable future. Dillon is in his final year. Our one fullback, Henry Pearson, is under contract, and so kind of a unique situation. Is he in a final year situation? I mean, it just kind of comes down to what Matt LaFleur wants to do with this team. So, at tight end, the big question mark is Tyler Davis. We know the Packers have been invested in Tyler Davis. It's been one of those things where I think we as fans generally didn't care for Tyler Davis, at least for the most part. Some people obviously did. But the Packers held on to him. I think over time he started to turn things around a little bit, kind of got a little bit impressive, did a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But now there's a couple issues. Number one, Kraft and Musgrave are obviously the top two guys and are going to remain the top two guys for a while. So really you're trying to battle for the number 3 spot. The other issue is Ben Sims has kind of emerged as a legitimate option. And so it's not just a question of like, well, Tyler Davis is all you got, right? I mean, yeah, we have Messiah Swinson and Joel Wilson, but nobody knows who that is or cares. So I do think because Tyler Davis is in the final year of his contract with the Green Bay Packers that this is kind of a, you need to demonstrate definitively that you are the number 3 guy. Because if they're comfortable with Ben Sims, then why give Tyler Davis a contract? Now, granted, probably not going to be a massive contract if they want to throw, a couple million or $1.5 million or whatever to keep him hanging around. I don't know he's going to get much of a better contract offer than that. But I do think this is one of those Tyler Davis needs to be that dude. I mean, it's possible that he doesn't make it this year. I think he does, but it's not impossible that they look at it. They really like Ben Sims. Maybe Messiah Swinson or Joe Wilson kind of steps up as somebody they prefer as a developmental prospect, and so they go in that direction. It's not impossible. But, Tyler Davis right now, what is he? He's looking at a little over $1 million is his contract right now, 1.075. At wide receiver, there's technically nobody that's in their final years, but there's a couple that are in the last 2 years. So we got Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Samori Toure, and Malik Heath. They all are either unrestricted or restricted free agents in 2026. With that said, there's a couple that I still want to highlight. Number one is Samori Toure. You've heard me talk about him, especially if you watch or listen to our Packernet Derailed. JJ is very anti-Samori Toure, so we get into it once in a while talking about Samori and our maybe not super fandom of him. But I do think he's got to do something. Because right now you got Watson, Wicks, Reed, Doubs, and presumably Bo Melton that are already firmly ahead of Samori Toure. We haven't really had a chance to see Grant DuBose. If he's able to step up, Toure might just be in big trouble. If not, DuBose might be in trouble, to be honest. I mean, you have to be able to overtake the other 7th-round guy. The other doomed 7th-round guy that is not going to be on the team very much longer. If you can't overtake him, you're in trouble. But I don't think Samori Toure, without some kind of a big breakout, some kind of a revelation, something is going to last super, super long. Malik Heath, likewise. I mean, he's kind of in the same boat. I mean, he's a restricted free agent, so the Packers can just kind of cling on to him as long as they feel like it. He's closer to being bottom of the roster than top of the roster, so it's not super worth talking about. But I do think he's a short-timer if something dramatic doesn't happen. The other guy worth talking about, though, is Christian Watson. He's kind of in an Eric Stokes situation where, look, I like him. I think he's talented. I think he's shown some things. But you cannot get injured 3 years in a row. And, listen, I think if he gets injured again this year, he has one more year either way. But it is getting to that point where it's like, listen, I know you're talented, but you've got to give us a year. You've got to string together a year. And the other problem with Christian is, I understand last year it was largely injury driven. But year one, he didn't pop off until mid-season. Year two, it took him until mid-season to pop off. He gave us 2 games and got injured again. You know, if you listen to the podcast, I am in the Christian Watson wide receiver 1 camp. He is my top guy. I wasn't super sold when we drafted him, and then I went back and watched the guy play. I watched week 1. I watched him sail past defenders. I saw that real, actual, speed. Speed is hard to gauge on a football field. I watched him just glide past people, and I was all in. I watched him run routes on in the training camp and all that kind of stuff. And every time I watch him, just the explosion off the line, the stride length, the everything about I'm all the way in on Christian Watson. Even with that being said, if we can't get something more, I think he's in legitimate danger. Now, again, let's say he gets injured for most of the season again. He's got one more year left on his contract, but I'm going to be, at that point, probably higher than 50% that he's not getting another contract. Because even if he finishes out year 4, it's better be a really, really good year 4, because there's got to be so many questions. Durability is going to be a massive problem, and how much are the Packers going to want to actually pay for a guy that's given you 1 out of 4 years of health? So listen, if Christian goes down for a game, not a big deal, right? That happens all the time. Even I'll give you 2 games. Much more than that, and we've got an issue, especially if it's like a hamstring, right? Because that means all this BS about we fixed it, we got to figure it out was not true. So I think Watson is an elite weapon for this team, and so I'm desperate for him to stay healthy. But I'm going to have to acknowledge if he gets injured for half a season or more again, or even close to it, 4 or 5 games, whatever, there's going to be some concern that maybe the next year is his last year. And then moving on to the offensive line, I mean, the big one that stands out here is Josh Myers. Very similar to A.J. Dillon, honestly. I think, similar to Dillon, like you look at PFF and there are some really admirable things, but a lot of people who have just been watching are like, yeah, but he's not good though. Similar to Josh Myers, like I don't know that anybody's really loved Josh Myers. I think there's been a contingent of people that just have always said he's not very good. And then you've got me, for example, saying, well, his pass blocking is actually quite good. And knowing the Packers, who couldn't give a crap about run blocking, he's not going anywhere. And then 2023 happened for Myers and Dillon, where they just, for whatever reason, came crashing down. And I think people that were never big on them kind of took that as an opportunity to say, yeah, see, they totally suck. Whereas, I look at it and go, well, it doesn't matter. There's no point in like standing my ground and being like, yeah, but before, it doesn't matter. Josh Myers, his performance last year was completely indefensible. And the bottom line is we need him. And I know some people aren't going to be very happy if he steps up and the pass blocking grade gets back to what it was and he ends up sticking around because they're just not happy with Josh Myers. And I know some of the people that are upset because of who we missed out on. Shortly thereafter, the Chiefs took the much better center. But whatever, the bottom line is he's a Green Bay Packer, and it benefits all of us Packer fans if he plays better. So, unlike A.J. Dillon, he doesn't have a line of people that are basically already in front of him. He's the guy. Now, we can move some stuff around. There's talk about Zach Tom and Elton Jenkins and whatever, possibly moving to center. But I don't think we want anybody other than him at center. I mean, it's just everything else is just sort of a fine, I'll do it kind of a deal. We want Elton Jenkins to stay where he is at left guard. We want Zach Tom to be the right tackle. I think we want Jordan Morgan to be the left tackle. We'll see how that pans out, which means we don't have a right guard. Otherwise, we have Rashid at left tackle, Jordan Morgan at right guard. Everything's where it needs to be. So if Josh Myers isn't the guy, we have an emergency spot to fill. And it is kind of an interesting question because you can say that if Josh Myers doesn't perform super well, he's gone. But again, we don't have anybody. I mean, if we just up and cut the guy, or we wouldn't have to cut him, his contract's over. If we just let him walk, I mean, we have to have another option. So I would assume we'd have to do something in free agency. And then the question becomes, what can we do in free agency that wouldn't be better to just pay Josh Myers, right? I mean, if there's a slam dunk home run, Xavier McKinney, Josh Jacobs situation at center, great. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But the bottom line is Josh Myers obviously is walking a very thin line, and a lot is needed of him. Aside from that, Royce Newman, I think we all feel like Royce is kind of on the way out. A lot of people are mad that he made it this far. I would just say be patient. This is the final year of his contract, and there are very limited situations where I can see Royce getting another contract from the Packers. It's not impossible. I mean, a lot of guys, they'll throw $1 million at somebody who has no other options just because there's some familiarity and at least sets some kind of a floor. It's a relatively low floor, but some kind of a floor. But, I think they had relatively high hopes for Royce. I think we all know he is well undershot those expectations. And so, I don't really know that that's going to be a thing for much longer. Again, I'm hopeful, as much as there's like anti-Royce conversations and whatnot. It's not like any of us want Royce to fail. We want Royce to be great. There's a lot of optimism about Royce. He was one of the guys that everybody tried to talk me into when we drafted him. He's one of those typical like fourth round, similar to Romeo Doubs and a few others. Sometimes they hit, sometimes they don't. Where it's like, I don't know, man, I think this might be different. Zach Tom was another one where it's like, I know he's a mid-round guy, but I really think he's going to be something. But it just didn't work for Royce. So, we saw glimpses. I mean, that first preseason, he was like the best offensive lineman that there was. I think that first year even, he was relatively impressive, and then he was just the worst ever. So there's got to be some, he has to show a glimpse of something. Now, again, with the offensive line being as thin as it is, unsure of Jordan Morgan, unsure of Jacob Monk, and, Sean Ryan is another conversation. We'll just say unsure of that. And Rashid being somewhat tenuous insofar as we like him, but maybe more as a backup. He's a decent starter. If you could do certainly worse, and a lot of teams are dealing with worse. But I'm just saying, I think the Packers are aiming for higher. That's the benefit Royce has, again, as opposed to like A.J. Dillon, who it's like you might have do a great job and you're still not going to win your spot back. But I would say Royce and Josh Myers are both very much on the outs. Lastly, kind of, is Andre Dillard. He was a first-round pick, a lot of hype, all that stuff, very athletic. He's had multiple stops at different places. He's been absolutely horrific. Obviously, there's a very narrow chance that something can happen with Andre Dillard where he ends up being a good football player, but I would say more than likely, if he even makes the team this year, he's going to be a depth piece that will not be back next year. But I would say he's got an uphill battle. He was brought in as a long shot, right? The Packers look at it and say, this guy's got elite talent. It would be unwise of us to not at least bring him in and see if we can turn that into being a good football player. But I would suspect it doesn't happen. And then there's also another guy, and that's the weird, like in the tackle spot is similar to like the wide receiver spot, where there's a lot of like decent talent, but you're not sure like how many are going to emerge to become elite, if any. Are they good enough? Should we look for better? But Caleb Jones is also in the conversation, and I know there was a lot of talk about Caleb and Rashid, and Caleb really showed some good stuff, but Rashid kind of took the mantle, kind of pushed Caleb down a little bit, but there was still some optimism about Caleb. Now, he is a restricted free agent, which more than likely means, unless the Packers are just going to try to clear out some space, that this is his final year, but they will retain his rights, and he's not going anywhere. However, I will just say, as much as I think he is going to stick around, it would be a good time for him to step up and say, hey, don't forget about me, right? You brought in Andre Dillard, and drafted Jordan Morgan. We're getting a crowded spot here, but don't forget, I'm still here and I can do the job. A couple other guys that are a couple years out, but also you need to see something. Zach Tom and Rashid Walker are on that list. Zach Tom's not going anywhere. That dude's getting a big boy contract soon. Could be as early as this year. They might wait until next year to pay the man. We'll see how this year pans out. Rashid Walker's really interesting because you look at it and say, well, even if he's not the starter, you don't want to get rid of him. The problem is, I don't know that there might be other teams looking at him saying, we'll take him and we'll pay him starter money. And the Packers are going to say, yeah, but we won't. So I don't know. It could be that the Packers do pay him to be our starting left tackle, which I'd rather that isn't the case, but that is one option. Option two is there are teams willing to pay him to be the starting tackle, and the Packers do not do that, and he ends up leaving. And then the third option is nobody really sees him as a starting tackle. He has offers that are kind of like, backup tackle money. one of those offers coming from the Packers, and he ends up staying for that money, which means we have a discounted left tackle until we can find a replacement for Rashid. But it's still kind of a weird situation. It would be nice and will be nice to kind of get one more year. I'm kind of on the fence with Rashid. I mean, his pass blocking grades are quite good. Obviously, there's a lot of clips of him like taking out Bosa, which are really impressive and whatnot. Like, he has that kind of ability. The run blocking isn't there. And also, I think the raw statistics are also not super great. So, I mean, there's work to be done. He's still young. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe the guy can continue to grow. But I don't know. I'm just kind of a little bit iffy on him. But the two main ones that stand out that are a couple years out, one is Luke Tenuta, who may not even make it through this year. We'll see. I mean, he's been around for a little while. A lot of those bottom of the roster guys, they give him a couple years and then they find somebody else to give him a couple of years to develop. I don't think we've ever really seen much from Tenuta. I'm sure there have been a handful of good notes in training camp, but outside of that, I mean, he's not going to emerge as anything. The biggest one, though, is Sean Rhyan. Sean Rhyan has been kind of slowly pushed forward. Like, it was catastrophic year one when he's like on the third team, and it's like you can just tell it's bad. Like, they're not even giving him opportunities. He obviously came in and was unbelievably raw. There was a lot they needed to change. There were some scandalous things going on about him making bad decisions. There was also talk about him maybe not really working as hard as he should. I mean, all red flag type stuff. I mean, the stuff that the Packers really try to avoid. They want to find high character guys that come in disciplined and all that kind of stuff. And Sean Rhyan, it just didn't seem to be on the program. Last year, he was pushed forward a little bit, and it was extremely up and down. I mean, he had games where it was like he was the best offensive lineman on the team. The very next week, he was like the worst offensive lineman in the NFL. So if we can maximize the highs and kind of minimize some of the lows, Sean Rhyan could be it. He might be the answer at right guard, and that would be amazing. But as of right now, I mean, as far as I can tell, I mean, look, he's got a couple years, so I can't say definitively if this year goes poorly, he's gone. But, I mean, kind of similar to Watson in a way where if it goes bad, I think I'm not going to be very confident. Not that he's gone next year, but I'm not going to be confident that in 2 years he's going to remain here. So those are kind of the guys that are a little tenuous. Elton Jenkins is locked up. Morgan just got drafted. Kind of recapping some of the other guys here. Marshawn Lloyd, Josh Jacobs, all the quarterbacks, assuming Jordan gets paid, which I'm sure he will. Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Bo Melton. Like, these guys they're long timers. And probably Christian and Romeo and probably, Zach Tom for sure is going to be another one. Probably Rashid. Anyways, why don't we take our first break? We'll come back. I want to rip through the defense, and then we'll take our final break and do some calls after that. We'll be right back. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. You ever hear of test driving a phone network? Well, US Cellular is letting you test drive their nationwide 5G for free. Try out US Cellular wherever you have spotty service, your commute to work, that one spot in your house where your service dips. It's as easy as doing a little beep boop pop boop pop with your phone. That's the buttons, that's the noise they make. Anyways, test drive US Cellular's nationwide 5G coverage for free for 30 days. Just download the Try Us app. US Cellular, built for us. Terms apply. Visit uscellular.com/tryus. My son started collecting football cards. I had no idea what the heck I was doing, so I went out and bought him one of those binders you put all the cards in and all that kind of stuff. Turns out, card collecting has come a long way since when I was a kid, and that's what people did. Now, there is a new way to buy, sell, and trade cards. It's called Arena Club. Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is the all-in-one trading card platform that you have to sign up for. Over at arenaclub.com/packdaddy. We actually did a whole YouTube video about this. I would encourage you to check it out. It is a fantastic website. You can, as I said, you can buy, trade, sell, but also you can display all of your cards right there on the platform. It gives you all of the grading. They'll even grade your cards. Their grading combines AI as well as human grading to get the most accurate grading of all your cards. And right now, you can get 10% off your first purchase by going to arenaclub.com/packdaddy. That's arenaclub.com/packdaddy for 10% off your first purchase.
You're a podcast listener, and this is a podcast ad. Reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a reproduced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com now. That's LIBSYN ads.com.
All right, defensive side, we'll kind of work the way we usually do, inside out. Defensive line, kind of a big one, right? It's one of those, a lot of the defense is this way, where if everything works out, we're loaded. If it doesn't, we're in trouble. Kenny Clark is kind of in that Jordan Love situation where, I mean, if he gets his contract, then the question is answered. But is he going to get his contract? If he doesn't get a contract this year, then he's firmly in that you have to prove it or you're out of here situation, right? I know the Packers like Kenny, and I know that they, well, I'll put it this way. They don't want to be in a situation where they don't have him. I don't think they feel confident enough with Wyatt and Wooden and Brooks being essentially the core. Yes, there's TJ Slaton, but he's also on this list of this is your last year. And to be honest, I don't think he'll be back next year. I mean, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. It's a new scheme. He absolutely can step up. I know he's a fan favorite. I just don't think he's ever been the guy that we've needed him to be. And now we've actually shifted away from what benefits him to a defense that's more about penetration. Well, TJ Slaton is not a penetration type of guy. Now, again, not to say that there isn't a, nose tackle type of player in the scheme, and situationally he could be a benefit, and the fact that there's really nobody behind him that has that skill set. But, if the coach is really saying the goal here is for you to get upfield, he's the last guy that I would look to. And even worse than that, Slaton has never been a good run defender. So the idea that, well, at least we got a guy that can anchor, and then Clark and Wyatt and whatnot can just tee off in the quarterback. Yeah, but Slaton's not good at it. So Slaton and Clark are firmly on that list of prove it. I do think there's a decent chance Kenny gets his contract, which takes him off the list, which really just means TJ Slaton. Otherwise, we're in a real good spot. Brooks and Wooden, I don't know what we have, but they're long-termers. They're not going anywhere for a while. Jonathan Brooks is locked up for a while, so he's technically not on the list, but I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of just, we'll see what happens with that. Wyatt is the only other one that's kind of close. He's got 2 more years on his deal. I don't think he's going anywhere. I really don't. I understand that he hasn't been the greatest ever, but I mean, the one thing he excels at is pass rush. I think he only gets better. Number 1, as he gets older. Number 2, as this new scheme comes in, it's tailor. It's the opposite of TJ Slaton. This is tailor-made for Wyatt. I don't give a damn if you can stop the run. You get upfield and you get whoever's in the backfield that has a football. That is tailor-made for Devonte Wyatt. And so even if he isn't the greatest, I think he gets another contract. It may not be a massive contract, but I think they want to keep him around. And so, yeah, I'm really not worried about it. So I'm looking at Kenny, and I would say I'm above 50% that he stays. Quite a bit above, actually, because I think there's a good chance he gets a contract this year. Even if that's slightly less than 50% in my mind that he does, there's still, on top of that, even if he doesn't get his contract this year, he's also got a chance to get a contract after that, which is not only a function of Kenny Clark, right? If Kenny is still that guy where it's like, yeah, he's decent, especially as a pass rusher. I think his pass rush has stayed somewhat consistent. His run defense has started to plummet, and that's been a big problem. He's never been the premier pass rusher that we hoped he would be, but I think that's flatlined at good, not great. And then the run defense has slowly just plummeted, and so now we look at Kenny and we say, this guy's getting top-of-market money. He's nowhere near it. Fine, but he's worth something. And so if he's willing to stay for less, again, it really depends what's going on around him. If Brooks and Wooden are just kind of And, Wyatt is decent, but, I mean, you need a rotation, right? And TJ Slayton is leaving. The bottom line is you'd rather have Kenny Clark than not. And I think that's true. And for me, anyways, when it comes to Kenny Clark, it's not a matter of do you want Kenny? I want Kenny. It's a matter of how much. And I think for most of us, we don't want to overpay or overvalue Kenny Clark. And so coming up with a number is interesting, and it would be kind of a fun exercise, and probably would want to do it before the contract comes out so it doesn't seem like I'm just agreeing with whatever happens. But, I've even said before, like if he got the same contract or even a little more, it would end up probably being a significant pay cut because, again, the salary cap has spiked so much. So off the edge, kind of interesting. Preston Smith I've talked about quite a bit in terms of I don't know exactly what the future holds for him. There's no doubt the Packers love Preston, right? They've never wavered on him whatsoever. I will say, though, he's going to be 33 years old next year. He's under contract until 2026, so he's got several years left. 2027 is a void year. But you're looking at, $7.5 million in cap savings if they move on in 2025. So instead of paying him the 17.5, they would have to pay 9.9 essentially to move on from him. Now, I'm not advocating for it. I don't think it's even on the Packers' radar right now, but I have said if Lucas Van Ness kind of emerges and you've got Rashawn Gary and Lucas, and Preston has never really done this kind of 4-3 thing before. He's always been sort of a true to form 3-4 edge. I mean, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Now, in Preston's favor, again, is the fact that, Lucas was not the guy last year. Rashawn kind of fell off and has some injury issues, and I'm not super optimistic about anybody behind them. Now, Brenton Cox, I'm hopeful for. Fingers crossed. I know there was a ton of hype about Brenton Cox. I actually do think the 4-3 thing will help him a little bit. Takes a little bit off his plate. Just get him in that down stance and just fire off the edge. It's less to process. It's just, there's still work to be done. I don't want to act like 3-4 outside linebackers are geniuses and 4-3 edge rushers are cavemen, but it could end up working. But either way, I think the Packers would want 4. And right now you've got Rashawn, maybe Preston, maybe Lucas, and probably not Brenton, right? So it's thinned out enough that I don't know that it would necessarily be on their radar, even if he falls off. But it's something that I've been wondering about. And who knows, maybe Preston will benefit from it too. It's like, I don't have to friggin' drop or do any of this crap. I just get to go get people. Let's do it. I'm hopeful. We see an emergence of everybody that wants to rush the passer and, put a little bit of the onus on the linebackers to kind of maybe clean up a little bit as opposed to, hope. Yeah, I feel like with Pettine and Joe Barry, the onus was on the defensive front. Certainly Pettine, but it felt like that was kind of the consistent thing all the way across, is the guys up front need to do all the work. They need to get the quarterback. They also need to stop the run. The linebackers are kind of useless, but if they get through, just kind of stand there and grab them and fall down to the ground. That's how it's felt for a very long time. It'd be nice to free up the front to just be like, I don't know, just go get them, and we'll let the linebackers, corners, and safeties figure it out from there. Linebackers also an interesting one. Obviously, we've got Quay and Edgerrin Cooper holding things down. We can actually start with Quay. He's a couple years out, but I don't think there's going to be a lot pushing him out because it's a similar situation, I would say, to Wyatt, where if he doesn't become the guy you hope he would be as a first-round pick, that just means you don't pay him as such, but he's still going to stay. You just pay him for whatever his value is. But Quay and Cooper are probably going to be locking this thing down for a while. The real question comes down to, we got 3 guys in the final years of their deal. Christian Welch, which is kind of that bottom of the roster, doesn't matter situation. The other 2, though, are Eric Wilson and Isaiah McDuffie. And I kind of feel like, there's a lot of guys that I look at and say, I think the Packers like them more than we do, as a, finger on the pulse of the fan base thing, certainly more than I do. There are other guys that I think fans like more than the Packers, and that would be Isaiah McDuffie and especially Eric Wilson. Maybe we overvalue the 2 guys a little bit, but it's just Isaiah McDuffie, maybe it's just his play style. I don't know what it is. Every time we watch him play a game, it's like, dude, that guy just, very rarely do you see him just like standing there and doing stupid stuff and like, come on, Duffy, let's go. He's just getting work done, and I think we all appreciate that. And with Eric Wilson, kind of similar. He doesn't play very much, but it seems like when he does, he handles business, and he's, of course, a great special teamer. So I want these guys locked up. They're always real cheap, so it's like, heck yeah. However, there's big money investment right now with Edgerrin Cooper and Quay Walker. I think the expectation long term is that, we're going to be putting money into these spots. So how much do we want to invest in Wilson and McDuffie? My hope, keep doing it. But I think this is going to, the bottom line is it is going to be a terrible year for any of these guys to fall off. If Cooper and Quay are out there handling business and McDuffie can't get the job done, and or we got safeties kind of filling in a lot and they're doing as good or better of a job, there's no reason to be paying them very much. If they're easily replaceable, then they're going to be replaced. As of now, I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but with two guys coming up, and with Cooper and Quay being pretty locked in, and let's not forget, Tyron Hopper also was drafted, so he's not going anywhere either. He's going to be given a real shot. If he starts to emerge in any kind of a way, then, it's going to be getting a little tenuous. So I'm hopeful we get to keep them both. I wouldn't be surprised if that doesn't end up happening, and I'm kind of looking a little bit more toward Eric Wilson. It always feels like every time they sign him, it's like down to the wire, like, come on, please, please. And then finally you just hear like, okay, we'll give him $1 million. Like, oh, final, thank you. It was, too. It was 1.4 is what he got. As for the secondary, there isn't much with safety. Zane Anderson's in his final year. Everybody else is locked up for a while. That's McKinney, Anthony Johnson, Javon Bullard, Benny Sapp, Evan Williams, Oladapo, Tyler Coyle, Christian Young, all under Packers control for some time. But I will say this seems to be, to me anyways, a big moment for Anthony Johnson. On one hand, he's sort of the underdog that's been usurped by McKinney, Williams, Bullard, and Oladapo, but he's also the guy with the most experience here, except for Xavier McKinney. It is a different scheme, so it's still new to Anthony Johnson, but I feel like he needs to make a statement here. Otherwise, he's going to get Samori Toure, right? There was some hype, there was some who knows maybe, and then a pile of wide receivers got dumped on top. Samori Toure got shoved to the bottom with almost no chance of reaching the top. And I feel like that's where Anthony Johnson is headed if he doesn't show something. So he's under contract for a long time. He's only going into his second year. He's not necessarily going anywhere, but it does kind of feel like, he's got a bit of an uphill battle here that he's going to need to demonstrate something, I think, pretty quick. As for the corner, the big one here is Eric Stokes. Right, Eric Stokes, similar to Christian Watson in that, he showed something, but it's been nothing but injuries. He actually is in his final year, so it's much more real than Watson. But obviously, he's being handed the spot opposite Jair, so he's not asked to be the number one corner. He's the number two guy. You got the slot locked up for the most part, probably with Keyshawn. You got one job, and it's being gift-wrapped with almost no competition. Valentine's there if you absolutely suck, and they'll swap you out. But, it's your job. All you have to do is stay healthy and be decent, and you can keep your job. If you can't do that, you will lose your job. Now, there is a chance because, again, there really isn't a great option. Do they really want to kick Stokes out, make Valentine the main guy, and then not really have anybody behind him? Because Corey Ballantyne and Robert Rochelle are also free agents after this year, which would mean you got Kalen King, Zion Gilbert, and Jamon Green as your only real options behind Carrington Valentine. So there is maybe that chance of, like I talked about with Quay or somebody else, or it's maybe not as good as we hoped, but we'll pay you what we think you're worth and keep you around at least for a little while until we can find a better option. But either way, this is the make or break year. This is you are the guy and you're going to get big time paid to be a top end corner, or you're going to be relegated to the scrap heap where you're going to get dumped and picked up and dumped and picked up, and you get $1 million here, $1 million there, a couple million there, and then eventually you're out of the league. So he's got to step up and make something happen. Aside from that, I would also highlight Keyshawn Nixon. He's pretty secure insofar as there's not massive competition in the slot, and you would think he has the special teams kick returner job pretty well locked up. But I do have some questions there. We've already seen are we actually going to keep Keyshawn or not? And we did end up keeping Keyshawn Nixon, which I thought was a good decision. But if we do start to see, for example, Bullard or Williams or somebody else pushing for that slot job, And maybe the change in these kickoff rules does make a big difference. I know some people disagree with that, and that's fine. But it is a different style of kick. I mean, there's a reason why some people are kick returners and some are punt returning. Returning isn't just returning. It's a very different art form depending on what kind of returning. And the fact of the matter is kick returning has just changed. And what we're hearing is that the wide receiver / corner type of returner is not going to be as valuable as, for example, the running back. Doesn't mean Keyshawn can't still do it. He might end up still being really, really good at it. But I think you're looking for something a little different in kick returners than what we were last year and prior. So if he is getting nudged out, or let me put it this way, if he loses the kick return job, I think he's in very serious danger. Because he is a mediocre at best slot corner. And if he loses the kick return job and the Packers believe they have something, for example, in Bullard to be a slot guy, this might be it for Keyshawn. Even though he has a contract that extends beyond this year, doesn't mean they have to keep him under any circumstances. Aside from that, on special teams, obviously there is a question of Anders Carlson. His contract is not an issue, but his ability is an issue. And there's already right now competition that could potentially take his job. I don't want to call it a farce because I think there is a chance that he could lose his job. But at the same time, it's his to lose, right? I mean, it's going to essentially be handed to him unless he's absolutely terrible. But the bottom line is, does it feel like it's his final year to prove it? It would have to be pretty bad, but maybe. So assuming he even wins the job, would I say he's he's certainly in danger of losing his job especially if it comes down to, as it did before, the Packers are in the playoffs and we need him to make kicks. We need those extra points and we need those field goals. Not blaming him for the postseason. I'm just saying it's an important thing. And you can't build this great team with a quarterback and a coach and the receivers and and get the defense humming and then lose games because of a kicker. Can't be doing that. So he would also be on the watch list. Now, long snapper too, I suppose, but nobody super cares about that. I haven't cared about a long snapper since Brett Good, man. I haven't cared. And I feel like we haven't replaced Brett Good since we lost him. I don't know why we got rid of him, but whatever. Anyways, why don't we go ahead and take a break? We'll come back and get a few calls in here from the good people. I'm just kind of stalling a little bit so I can get this set up. We'll take a break. We'll be back and hear from Carson Caldwell, our resident guy that makes our videos and whatnot that are super dope. We'll be right back.
What's going on is Carson Caldwell from Cleveland, Ohio, and I've got a few things that I want to talk about really quick. Starting off with the whole NFL lawsuit thing about Sunday Ticket. I think the argument is stupid. I'm not really too worried about it because I don't really think it's going to go through. Right. I think that, like I said, the argument is just dumb, especially after listening to the podcast and everything, kind of thinking through why they would even do that. It just makes no sense. So I'm not that worried about it. Obviously, if it goes through, would suck, really bad, but I'm not very...
And that honestly was my biggest reason for hammering it so much. First of all, I do find it stupid. I find the argumentation stupid, but I think the immediate reaction, and honestly for me too, just like gut reaction as soon as I see a headline is dope. Maybe they'll drop the prices and, maybe you get like a check for $50 in the mail or something, but if they drop the prices, heck yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love to have it. I mean, that's sort of the instant gut reaction that I have, and I'm sure a lot of other people had. And, so yeah, I was just more so really hammering the point to kind of get people out of that mode. Like, please don't think this is a good idea. Let's get to the next step of this. Like, yeah, you get this little check and then you screw over the NFL and all of us majorly. Not that any of us have direct control. I'm just saying, let's not jump on this bandwagon.
Worried about it, so I don't care all too much. Another thing is I was watching a video on YouTube, I think yesterday or 2 days ago or something. And it was basically about why the Packers could contend for a Super Bowl. And as I was watching it, they were talking about the offense and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, I know a lot of, I know all this stuff about the offense already. So then I started thinking about the defense and I'm like, man, I haven't really thought about the defense yet because obviously I know we have Jeff Hafley coming in who's new and stuff like that. We drafted a lot of new guys. We got Xavier McKinney who's new to us. And so I was just thinking about it, and then immediately it was kind of like a daunting feeling of.
By the way, I'm very sorry to interrupt. As soon as I saw your call, I'm like, I wonder if he sent me something. Got your email, dude, so I'm excited.
Like, I'm very confident that Jordan Love is good. I'm very confident in all these pieces on offense. I've spent so much time diving into that and trying to convince other people that this offense is real and that Jordan Love is real, because that's what people talk about. But then I was thinking about, just for myself, my own knowledge of like, okay, are the Packers as a whole going to be good? And as I'm looking at the defense, I'm like, man, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of new stuff going on, so I have no idea if they're going to be good or not. And so listening to like your safety episode, like the rookie safeties, got me thinking a lot. Like, man, like Oladapo, I hadn't thought about him since we drafted him, and like stuff like that. And so it was pretty interesting, like thinking through all that stuff. I got to go watch some highlights or some film reviews on them, and look at some of their stats as well. But that's exciting, but it's also very nerve wracking. Like, if our defense is bad, we're going to be bad. So that's not very good. And then finally, my third thing is, I know you're not a fantasy football guy, but each year I have $100 that I spend on fantasy football, like two $50 leagues. One $50 league is like a dynasty league, so you keep the same team each year and just draft rookies. And then another $50 league for like redraft leagues. But in fantasy football, you can like trade draft picks. And so I was trying to think about, as I'm trying to look through to see where I want to move around and stuff like that, how can I assess the value of draft picks? And I know you're not a fantasy football guy, but I feel like it's the same concept as like a GM on draft day. So just let me know, like, how can I assess the value of a draft pick, whether that's moving up 3 spots to like give up some more, or moving back to receive a little bit more. How can I assess the value of that? Just kind of curious.
Got a part 2 here we'll get to, but just real quick on that first part. I'm with you 100% on the defense. And we are in kind of like a lot of, first of all, I'll give a shout out to a lot of people that have done a lot of good work in assessing the defense. I know Clayton has done a lot on that. I know Dusty Evely has done a lot. A lot of the film guys have looked into this defensive scheme. In fact, the Cheesehead TV Draft Guide, I think Dusty did a whole article breakdown on that. So, I mean, if you wanted to dive more into it, I would even encourage you to even reach out to Clayton or any of those guys, just if you have some questions or whatever. I'm sure they'd be happy to give you their insights on it. But with that being said, I feel like we're in a bit of a dark period. I've kind of talked about it before, where you kind of just get a feel for things. You know how we just kind of say things sometimes, like, oh, Matt LaFleur with his end arounds, or Joe Barry playing soft and off, or what, like you kind of get this feel for what people like to do or whatever, not using Aaron Jones, or just these little, I don't know the word for it. It's not cliche, but whatever things are. So we got to just get to know this defense. What are their strengths and their weaknesses? What do they do well? What do they struggle with as a collective? Hopefully we get to know them long enough to be able to identify these things, and it's not like this was so bad he's got to get fired right away. But yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm starting to get pumped up. Like you said, with the safety episode, I really wasn't planning on getting excited about it or even factoring that in necessarily, because my whole thing is maybe we'll have one if Bullard can play, or one of them, probably one, I should say, will play that actual safety spot, but that's about it. But yeah, as I went through it, it's like, well, why not? Is it that crazy to think Bullard could beat out Keyshawn Nixon? Maybe a little bit. Is it that crazy to think that we could see Oladapo playing linebacker, at least in certain sub packages? Is it super crazy to think that, somebody else can beat out Anthony Johnson Jr., whether it's Williams or whatever? Not really. So, yeah, and there's just, I don't remember if I actually talked about it or not, but one of the things that I was thinking about is Lucas Van Ness. And I think I just talked about it maybe in this episode, but how forgotten he is. Like, just don't talk about him. What happened to Lucas Van Ness? Just in terms of, the hype surrounding a person, the gap between the hype and the potential, there's nobody bigger than Lucas Van Ness. He has sky-high potential and upside. And I feel like we all just forgot about him. So, yeah, that plus the scheme change, and I'm a huge Wyatt fan, as you guys know. I'm excited to see what he can do. hopefully he can take a step and whatnot. So, yeah, man, lots to love about the defense. And if we can have the offense play just like it did last year, I'm not even asking for growth necessarily. I mean, I'd like to see Christian stay healthy. I'd like to see Musgrave stay healthy and whatnot. But if these guys just relatively stay healthy and don't grow at all, just stay exactly the same team, it's going to be a real good offense. And then you get a defense that's, just solid. It doesn't have to be Legion of Boom. It doesn't need to be like Ray Lewis Ravens or anything like that. It's just a solid complementary defense. It's going to be a good football team. I think it's going to be a good football team either way. But I'm excited. I'm ready to start getting some good news about the defense. So let's get to part 2 about your fantasy football stuff.
I got caught by the 3 o'clock monster for the very first time that I've been calling in. But those 3 things were something that I'm interested in kind of knowing what you had to say about. Or I guess 2 things, though the first thing was what I thought about it. But one more thing is, so this year, usually like if I'm going to go to any Packer games.
All right, I guess I'll just stop there because we're done with the fantasy football thing. So, yeah, fantasy football is not really my jam. I know when I first started doing it, I got real into it, and I was all up on the spreadsheets and whatnot. I don't know how in depth you want to go. I'm a big spreadsheet number nerd kind of person, so if I wanted to go all in on fantasy football, I mean, there's 2 main things that I think. Well, there's 3 things you should do. Number 1, that no matter what you have to do is really familiarize yourself with the prospects. Try to determine value. Because every year you look at it and be like, why is this person so high? They're not that good. And you'll have to learn that stuff. Well, it's because, the wide receiver 2 dropped out and the quarterback was hurt for part of the time. So there's just this expectation of this, that, or the other. So you got to familiarize yourself with all the people to begin with. Number 2 is to learn strategies, right? What the heck is it? Zero RB, right? Strategy, or the, go running back first, which is the opposite strategy, or my thing, which I don't think necessarily has a name, but I always like to do it when I wasn't really trying very hard, is at least have one good player in every position. So I would try to get the guys first, even if it was a little early, just so I had a quarterback, a wide receiver, a running back, a tight end, a kicker, and a defense, and they were all good. And after that, you try to get lucky. That was just my general thing that I like to do. When I was going super crazy, I thought it made a lot of sense, and I was doing quite well, is to try to figure out, if you do last year, how would you draft the best players? What strategy would have you drafting the best? I mean, you know what the points are, so there's no guessing. It's just a question of run a draft and end up with the most points afterward. Find out how you would do that. So that was always my main way of thinking about it, is you can go back in time and even have all the answers, and it's almost like a puzzle. Like, how can I get this many points onto my team? So I would think that they have that. I mean, it was such a long time ago. I was doing it on a spreadsheet. I'm guessing they have simulators that you can just pull up last year. I don't know. If not, there should be, but it's just a good way to kind of familiarize yourself, and you kind of understand the strategies a little bit, because it's like you'll see where there's that big drop off. If you grab wide receivers, now you can't get a running back. It's like, okay, well, I don't want to do that. And it kind of just can help you to almost either develop your own strategy or maybe to understand them a little bit more. I think that's where I'm more of a top-down learner than a bottom-up learner. You can't just tell me what I need to go do it and then see why it sucks and be like, okay, now I get it. I understand now. So I don't know if that's helpful at all, or if I even necessarily answered your question. But those would be my 3 biggest things: is learn the prospects and kind of develop your own. Because sometimes you'll disagree. You look at it and be like, you know what? Everybody's saying it. I'm not feeling it. I don't care. Number 2 is learn the general strategy, and then number 3 would be to just practice. And again, I would practice with last year more so than this year. I mean, you can do this year because I think they have the estimates, so that'll probably work out just as well. You just got to make sure that after you run a simulation, you add up all the points that you got. And your goal is to always have the highest number of points and keep track. Like, you can pull out a spreadsheet and say, okay, I'm going to do 10 0 RB. And I'm going to try to get as high because I can see what the points are. I'm going to try to get as many points as is humanly possible. And then I'm going to run, trying to do RB first or whatever the strategies you can. Run it 10 different times with 10 different strategies and see which ones consistently come out with the highest points. Then that's the one you're going to want to do. That would be my thought. If I was just approaching it today and somebody's like, we got to learn how to be really good at fantasy football, that would be my first step, is to, first of all, plant my flag on this is my strategy and then go from there. And then at that point, it really just comes down to identifying, like just being really accurate with the values of the players.
Because I'm in Ohio, I go to like a Detroit game or a Pittsburgh game last year or something like that where like it's a little bit of a drive, but not too much. I've actually never been to Lambeau Field, which is a place obviously I really want to go. But because I live in Ohio, I can really only go to the games where they're like kind of close by. So like the preseason game when they come to Cleveland on August 10th or whatever, I'll be at that game, the preseason game. I already have tickets for that. Yes. They were like $10 or something. So I have tickets for those, but like this year I was thinking about like, am I going to go and eat Packers games? Am I going to maybe take a trip down to Green Bay, which I don't think I'm going to do. But I was just thinking about this year, my goal is to start going to like random NFL games, whether that's just Browns games in Cleveland when they play like the Bengals or something, or going to Cincinnati to watch the Bengals play like the Chiefs or something. I don't know.
Yeah, because I don't know exactly where you are, but I mean, you got Cleveland, you got Indianapolis, you got Pittsburgh, depending on how far you want to go, there's a lot here, I mean, you got Washington, D.C. is relatively close. Baltimore is relatively close. I mean, of course you've got that Philly and New Jersey thing right there. I mean, that's getting a little further away, but you got Detroit, you got Chicago. I mean, if you have a big enough circle, I think all of those would kind of fall in there. So you're in a pretty good spot. Like for us, it's, what do we have? From where we are, you got Green Bay, Minneapolis, and Chicago. It's about it. I mean, everything else is getting pretty far away. I mean, you got maybe go around the corner to Detroit, Indianapolis. It's about it. So, yeah, you're in a pretty nice central location there.
But obviously, I love the Packers. My favorite team will always be my favorite team. But I also love football. And so I think spending like $40 or $50 to go watch a Browns game when they play the Chiefs or something, just to see like Mahomes play and just to watch like an NFL football game would be pretty fun. So if you have any game recommendations that are in like the Ohio area or like the bordering states that are just a few hours away from Cleveland, let me know. I'm going to go to a few of them. And, that's all I got to say. So go Pack, go. The season is just around the corner. I'm so excited. And, that's all I got. So see ya.
Yeah, I mean, that's as far as bucket lists go. I mean, there's a lot of stadiums I'd love to be able to go to. I mean, obviously, it'd be great to be able to go to all of them if possible. But I'd love to be able to, like go into a Chiefs game. It's also cool to like have no stress. I don't have a lot invested in it. I'm just here for a good time. And if you show up to like a Chiefs Bengals game in a Packers jersey, nobody cares. Like you're not going to get booed. You know what I mean? So, I mean, people will be cool to you there. I mean, I actually did that when I went to a Buffalo Bills and Dolphins game. I went there as a Packer fan. Bills fans were super cool to me. Plus it was a rivalry game, so they were so consumed with hatred for Dolphins fans, they didn't really even notice I was there. But what do we got? 49ers, Bills, Cowboys, 49ers, Jets. I'm looking at some of the top games. One of them that's highlighted that you could consider, I don't know if I would care a ton, but it's one of the top 10 best games according to this website here, would be Eagles-Bengals at Cincinnati. So that's week 8 is a thought. I don't know how good the Eagles are. I mean, it could be a potentially, they could be talking Eagles-Bengals Super Bowl depending on how things go. If the Eagles look like they did to start the season, if the Joe Burrow Bengals are tearing it up. Either way, that could be a fun one. Plus, it's not in Philly. I'm sure there's going to be some trash Philly fans there that are just being D-bags, but you don't have to actually go into Philly and deal with all the ruckus. So I think that could be cool. As much as I would think that going to a Bengals game would be like one of my least favorite things in the world. Now that Joe Burrow and whatnot, I think that'd be a good game. That'd be something to consider. So that's my one recommendation. There's probably some better ones, but there you go. Dakota.
Ryan, this is Dakota, that nerd in Tennessee again.
What's up?
I just heard, believe it was Garrett, speak about the announcer thing. So first of all, I got to say this: I seem to be in the minority. I actually love Aikman and Buck. I don't know now. I haven't been watching. Like, I've been really heavy watching since 2016. So, I mean, Aikman and Buck is, I mean, Madden's obviously iconic because when I would play NFL games way before 2016, I'd hear a lot of Madden. Madden's obviously iconic. But to me, Aikman and Buck are the current living iconic callers, I guess. And I'm sure that just infuriated a whole bunch of people. But, yeah, sure. I mean, seems like they could be a little biased. But they're also not paying as much attention to the Packers as we are because they're paying attention to everybody. So they're also a little bit more ignorant, specifically about the Packers, than we may be. Either way, I enjoy them, and I completely against. Oh, before I go there, Tony Romo. So I saw Tony Romo when he first started, you know, and I loved him. I thought he was awesome. And then I got really busy, especially in 2019. I went to the academy, and I only got to watch like 3 halves of a Packers game between, what was it, September or August and November. Like I almost didn't get to see anything. So I didn't know anything about, you know, I didn't know Tony Romo at the time was like falling in how good he was. And I remember the first time I heard somebody critique him, I was offended. I was like, no, this man was good. I was legitimately offended. Come to find out, he's a Jeff Janis of announcers. I was just listening to him this past year. I was like, yeah, he really fell off a cliff there.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
He had his one good year and a half.
Yep.
For me, and I based all of my opinion on that year and a half and didn't pay attention to how he's progressing. But anyway, the AI thing absolutely would, like, it would be a cool test. Yeah, let's have AI call. But no, if AI was calling, I would 100%, or announcing, I would 100%, tune that out. I'm very much in the, we're going to have the human touch. You know, maybe they can recall some past experiences that they have, and AI does not have personal past experiences. And also, I'm on board with having a scouting department. NBC should have a scouting department for announcers. Anyway, I'm reaching my 3 minutes, so peace.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I mean, I'm in the Aikman is an anti-Packers person category, which annoys the crap out of me. But there's no doubt at this point. I mean, Aikman and Buck is the iconic call right now. That is it's hard to pick something more so than that. You know, I mean, obviously if you're my age, you remember going back into the 90s or whatever, but I mean, if you're younger, if you're 20s, I don't know what you would think could be more iconic than Aikman and Buck as far as NFL announcers go. Tony Romo, yeah, It was like a cool parlor trick where he called plays and it ended up happening. And then I remember just listening to him this year, and it was the most painful thing. He's awful. I mean, he's just awful at his job. As far as AI goes, I mean, look, I'd rather go the route of getting just scouting really good talent and going that direction. But the problem I have with human touch is it's the human touch that's ruining everything. It's the and this is just me. Obviously, we differ on this, but like it's the personal stories that I don't want to hear. Like, I just announce the game. I don't need, somebody just caught a pass and you got to tell, back when I was, bro, shut up. I don't care. It's always been bad I know there's been videos done in the past, but like how awful some of these announcers are. They'll show calls where guys are getting touchdowns and they just talk like nothing's happening. He's going to get to the 20, the 10, the 5. That is a touchdown. Devontae Adams, Green Bay Packers up by 6. Like, bro, I'm sorry I woke you up from your nap. And you splice that with soccer where they're screaming and you got to interject some life into this freaking sport, man. So you would have to hear the AI thing if it sounds robotic and stupid. Yeah, I don't want that either. But if they can make it actually sound like the announcers without all the stupid crap, without all the bias, because there is no bias, without all the opinion, like, well, I don't know, Jim. I don't know about that. Like, bro, just shut up. And then on top of that, if you can bring back John Madden, dog, I'm just saying, if you got John Madden and it sounds like John Madden and with the same kind of silly stuff that he was talking about, I know I just said I don't like that, but John Madden gets a pass. I'm sorry. There's nothing about anybody else's human touch that is endearing to me. And I'll be honest, if it wasn't just awkward having it completely silent, I would just mute them anyways, because I just have no interest. I usually tune out the announcers anyways. That's why that's why a lot of people have stronger opinions than I do, because they're like, oh, there's so-and-so is such a terrible. I'm like, I don't even know who that is. I have no idea. All the voices kind of blend together. There's just a couple that stand out, obviously, Aikman and Buck and whatnot. Romo is identifiable because he has kind of that raspy voice, and obviously he's bad at his job, so that stands out. But a lot of them I barely notice, and I only notice when they're annoying the crap out of me. So, yeah, I mean, I don't expect it to happen, but if that was a thing, I'd be all for it, especially if you can bring back some older, iconic voices. I think that would be fantastic. Or just something random, dude. Have Darth Vader call the game or something. I don't give a crap. I just, I don't know. I don't find a lot of the stuff endearing, and I think it's partially because they've done such a bad job. They're not even trying to find people that are talented at this. They have, high-profile football players. As soon as they leave, these networks who just suck at their job throw as much money as they possibly can at them because they just want to buy. So stupid these people. They just want to buy views. Like, do you know how to put together a good product? No, I just want to buy views. This goes into the same conversation as like making movies and stuff. Like, you don't know how to do it, so you just throw money at it and hope people watch it. Like, I throw money at big actors, throw money at this series. Like, oh, it's a new X-Men, so that'll buy views. Like, bro, can you just make something good? I don't understand why everybody sucks at everything these days. Anyways, they need to stop paying football players. It's so stupid. It's Tom Brady leaves. Oh, we got to have Tom Brady. Dude, he looks bad. I mean, I'm sure he needs some training or whatever, but like I said, I watched him do a call of something. I don't know what it was. It was cringeworthy. And then it's like, well, we'll get the Kelseys because they're kind of crazy. And it's like, maybe that's funny. I don't know. The Manning thing is a disaster. I hate that so much. It's like a separate TV show that I don't want to watch during a football game. I don't know. Anyways, somebody's calling me. I'm going to get out of here. You guys have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.